constantly, over the course of President Biden's presidency, the Iranians have been looking for surrogates to conduct terrorist attacks inside the United States. And the avowed strategy of the U.S. government under President Biden to this day has been to empower and engage the Iranian regime to make them be more responsible, even as they are really the root of all the violence and troubles in the Middle East. So it just shows how really bankrupt the administration is.
Welcome to Stakelbeck Tonight. I'm Erick Stakelbeck, and just days after narrowly escaping death from an assassin's bullet, President Trump is reportedly the target of another assassination plot. And this time it comes from an old foe. U.S. officials said Tuesday that security around Trump was ramped up in recent weeks thanks to an Iranian plot against his life. Now, we don't have a lot of specific details yet, but according to Fox News, the Department of Homeland Security has received intelligence from a human source, presumably someone on the ground inside Iran, that Iran's regime is plotting to assassinate President Trump. The Secret Service was informed of the plot, and again, security around him has supposedly been increased, although you wouldn't have known that, judging by Saturday's assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, in which the shooter somehow had a clear shot at Trump from just over 100 yards away. I believe divine intervention saved him that day, and perhaps God's hand is in the exposure of this Iranian plan as well. So why would Iran's Ayatollahs want to see President Trump dead? A few reasons. Number one, Qasem Soleimani. He was the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps and widely regarded as the world's most dangerous terrorist, the main liaison between Iran and its terror proxies like Hezbollah. That is, until January 3rd, 2020, when Soleimani was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Iraq ordered by then-President Trump. At the time of his death, Soleimani was planning new attacks against U.S. troops in the Middle East. And folks, ever since he was taken out, the Iranian regime has been gnashing its teeth and vowing revenge, not only against Trump, but against other members of his administration, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and former National Security Advisor John Bolton, which raises the question, would Iran's leaders be so bold as to assassinate former U.S. officials on American soil? Only if they didn't fear the repercussions. Which brings me to the second reason Iran would want to kill President Trump. Iran sees the United States under President Biden as weakened, enabling Iran and its proxies to run wild and set the Middle East on fire. And Iran knows that if Trump gets back in office, well, there's a new sheriff in town. Folks, Iran's leaders definitely internalized Trump's takedown of Soleimani, not to mention the fact that he pulled the U.S. out of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, declared Soleimani's Revolutionary Guards Corps a terrorist organization, moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and presided over the Abraham Accords peace treaties between Israel and its Arab neighbors. In other words, the return of Donald Trump is the Iranian regime's worst nightmare, because tyrants respect and fear strength. And if you're Iran, China, Russia, or North Korea, who would you rather see in office? The guy who seems incapacitated, or the guy who gets shot, then jumps right up a few seconds later, pumps his fist, and yells "fight" as he's covered in blood? Folks, I'm not trying to be political. I'm being real. There are evil forces on the march right now that want to kill us, our kids, and our grandkids. So we have to tell it like it is. This is no time to mince words. It's a dangerous time. But here's the good news. God Almighty is still on the throne. And as believers, we can face the gathering storm with full confidence and boldness, knowing that He's in control and that His hand of protection and guidance is on our lives. So be encouraged, because I believe God's not done with America, and we'll tell you why next. Whoever the next president is, he'll have to face some very serious national security threats. Folks, I've argued that this is the most dangerous time for America since World War II. Joining me now from D.C. to break down the threats and how Trump and Biden would deal with them is James Carafano, a top expert on national security and foreign policy challenges and a fellow at the Heritage Foundation. James, great to have you with us. Hey, how seriously should we take the news that Iran is plotting to assassinate President Trump? And is the Biden administration, James, doing anything to send a message to Iran's regime that this kind of behavior won't stand?
Yeah, there's two really important things to take away from why the administration said this now, because quite honestly, Iranian officials have constantly been organizing plots to assassinate Americans in the United States, including former officials, so it's nothing new. So why highlight it now? Well, one, the administration says, oh, well, see, we were actually beefing up security for President Trump. Well, that's actually a really scary thing, because if that's better security with those kinds of massive operational failures, that's not making you look good. So literally, part of it's just a cover up. I mean, all of a sudden they come up with this Iranian intelligence to try to say, oh, well, we're actually doing a better job protecting Trump, which is nonsense. That's just excuse making. That's just covering your butt. So it just shows how disingenuous they are. But the second issue, which is even more significant and which really hasn't got a lot of discussion, is constantly over the course of President Biden's presidency, the Iranians have been looking for surrogates to conduct terrorist attacks inside the United States. Wow. And the avowed strategy of the U.S. government under President Biden to this day has been to empower and engage the Iranian regime to make them be more responsible, even as they are really the root of all the violence and troubles in the Middle East. So it just shows how really bankrupt the administration is. But this is something I would predict. If President Trump is reelected, the number one foreign policy initiative and one of the top and first things he will do is completely change U.S. policy in the Middle East, and he'll fix it. He will engage and empower engage and empower Israel like a friend, and he will treat Iran like the enemy it is. I'm not talking about regime change. I'm not talking about starting World War III, but he will crush them and put them back in the very small box they were when he left office.
Yeah, James, which he was on the way to doing during his first term. Look, pulling out of the Iran deal, designating the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards a terror organization. We could go on. A much different posture, though, by the Biden administration. James, you mentioned, and it's stunning for people to hear, I think, that Iran is looking to carry out attacks on U.S. soil. Don't they fear any sort of repercussions, or have they been completely emboldened under Joe Biden?
Well, the reality is Iranians see weakness as a green light for aggression. This is why I'm actually a little more optimistic than you are about that we're heading to such a dangerous space, because these guys know what's coming with Donald Trump, and none of them, not the Chinese, not the Russians, not the Iranians, are going to like it. And of all the problems, the Iranian one is the easiest to fix, because the Trump team will come into office knowing what to do. We know things have changed since 2016 and 2020, so it won't look exactly like the old U.S. policy. But getting back to the Abraham Accords, pulling the Arab states together, supporting Israel, crushing the Islamist extremists, marginalizing Hamas, Hezbollah, the surrogates, really, really putting the pressure on the Iranian regime. These are things I think will start absolutely on day one, and these guys got to know this is coming.
Yeah, James, about a minute before the break, and you'll come right back with us after the break. The next few months, very dangerous time for President Trump. Look, we've got not only internally, but externally, people who do not want to see him back in office. Are you concerned about terror threats against Trump prior to the run-up to the November election?
Well, I think two things. First of all, look, this is baked in from the beginning. I mean, they've known, good friends and enemies know who Biden is. They know Obama-Biden foreign policy. They have that playbook down. They know exactly what to do. Look, they're not stupid. They know that Biden's power has been diminished. They have intelligence services. So this is all baked in. So enemies are finding some weakness that we didn't have before. But the other thing is what you have to think about. It doesn't matter what kind of Pearl Harbor or whatever you think you're going to pull off now. If Donald Trump is elected and comes in January, you know what you're going to face. And I think that actually would make our enemies more cautious.
Can you kind of compare and contrast U.S. policy under President Trump to U.S. policy under President Biden when it comes to Israel? Again, as you said, it seemed like tyrants were on notice under President Trump, but they're kind of running amok right now. We have a war in the Middle East, and Iran and its proxies feeling very emboldened. Can you compare and contrast the two leaders' approach to the region?
Is to get the Arab countries working together in cooperation with Israel to put a united front against Iran. Just that simple.
Yeah.
So what Trump did is he was a friend to Israel, and that was a strong signal to our Arab friends that the United States was in the region and it was to stay and a partner. What Biden did is he flipped the script. He said, we're going to engage the Iranians and we're going to distance the Israelis, really for domestic politics, because half his policy doesn't like Israel. The problem with that is when you disengage from Israel, the Arabs, they see it as the less value of it as a partner. And when you engage the Iranians, they're like, oh my God, you're letting, the lion out of the den. And then they start looking for other people, the Russians, the Chinese, whatever, to mitigate against that. So this is the easiest problem in foreign policy to fix, which is to fix the Middle East policy. And this will have global repercussions. This will change the situation in Africa, Europe, and even in the Indo-Pacific. It's going to rewrite global foreign policy on day one.
It's amazing, James. Iran is truly the head of the snake when it comes to the chaos in the Middle East and really throughout the world, the external terror threats. What do you think of the Biden administration's strategy, if you can call it that, when it comes to Israel right now, in terms of what Israel's facing to the south in Gaza and to the north with Hezbollah? It seems like mixed messaging, and that's being kind from the Biden administration as Israel faces its time of greatest need in decades.
Yeah, it's completely hapless. On the one hand, half their party hates Israel. So they're reluctant to full-throatedly embrace Israel as a partner because domestically it's bad for them. And it enrages the Iranians, which they want to placate. But the reality is Israel is the most important American strategic ally in the region. And if we don't want to have divisions and aircraft carriers there every day and be the world's policeman, we need not only a strong Israel, but to Israel to partner with the Arab states. And so they can't give up on the reality of that, but it's politically incorrect for them to want to partner with the Israelis. So it has them in this, kind of standing in the middle of the Grand Canyon without having a foot on either bank.
Yeah. Hey, about 6 months until the inauguration. Things look good for President Trump, obviously, right now, but anything can happen in the next half year. Are you concerned at all that Iran or the likes of China, I'm thinking Taiwan, Russia, that they see this window perhaps closing of a weakened, enfeebled Joe Biden? And again, the new sheriff in town, Trump, coming in January. Is there concern that, look, the next 6 months or so could be a very dangerous period?
Well, the problem for them is the risk on the back end, what happens in January. So I would say the most dangerous scenario is Iran just declares itself a nuclear power, right? Biden will do nothing. Even if they don't have a nuclear weapon, we'll just say we're a nuclear power, we have a nuclear weapon, right? Nobody's going to argue with them. People are just their hair's going to be on fire. Biden will do nothing. And then when Trump comes in, Iran says we're a declared nuclear power. What are you going to do about it? Now, there's a risk for them because they don't know what to expect from Trump. But on the other hand, that's it. What are the Russians going to do? Look, I mean, the Russian offensive has failed. They have no other serious cards to play that are going to significantly disrupt things. And I think that the Chinese are playing the long game. Starting something for them might actually assure that Trump gets elected, and maybe they don't want that. So Look, I mean, I don't talk to these guys, but most of them don't want to have a war with the United States, and the smart play for them is to sit on their hands until after the election. But we'll see what happens.
James, about 30 seconds left. Military readiness for the United States. You have served our country with distinction in the U.S. military. Yeah. Our readiness right now, as we have this gathering storm, obviously, of tyrannies and rogue regimes, our military readiness, and I'm sure that's going to change under a Trump administration.
Right. two problems, right? Not just military readiness, which has declined. You can look at the Heritage Index of U.S. military strength. It's online. You can see that. But the other thing, and again, I'm not a Republican, not a Democrat, don't have a dog in the fight here. But the reality is political interference in the military, green transition, DEI, ESG, all this stuff, it is corroding and undermining the cohesiveness and the morale and the capability of the military. So it's a dual problem. It's not just not investing in the military, it's actually bringing divisive, corrosive American politics into the heart of military service. And it's beginning to have a very, very serious effect on the leadership, on the ranks, and on the relationship between civilian and military leaders.
Stakelbeck Tonight, my all-new nightly series on current events through a bold biblical lens. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.